describe a situation. And there's been a lot in my life that has, for lack of a better word, sucked. First thing on that list is a chronic condition called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS for short. I was diagnosed with POTS when I was 15, after 15 months of searching for some kind of explanation to my constant fatigue, my incredible stomach pains, and the actual green color of my skin. POTS is a form of dysautonomia, which in simplest terms means everything a healthy person's body does automatically, my body either does improperly or does not do it all. So this affects everything from my brain to my heart to whether or not I sweat. I deal with a really fun thing called brain fog, which kind of feels like thinking through pudding. So if there's like a really long pause, it's just because the pudding's gotten really, really thick, and I'm going to have to refer back to my notes to figure out where I am. Bear with me. I have a lot of fatigue, like a lot. And sometimes my heart beats extra hard just to remind me that it's there, in case I've forgotten. I can't regulate my own body temperature, so I think that means I'm cold-blooded. And I tend to change colors based on how poorly my blood is circulating, so I'm pretty sure I've actually been a chameleon the entire time. And that would explain a lot of things. To sum it all up, things kind of suck. And this is where the infomercial guy says, but wait, there's more. In August of 2016, I was diagnosed with median arcuate ligament syndrome, or MALS for short, because we shorten everything. Everything's too long, so we shorten it. MALS is a congenital anatomical anomaly, which is a really, really fancy way of saying even my insides are abnormal. In MALS patients, the diaphragm sits too low in the body, and this causes the median arcuate ligament to compress the celiac artery, which comes off your aorta, and a bundle of nerves called the celiac ganglion. Nerves do not like being compressed, in case you didn't know that. I can tell you from experience, they really don't like it at all. And when they are compressed, they start to send all kinds of fun signals to your brain, and they cause a lot of symptoms like pain, nausea, lots and lots and lots of fatigue. The weirdest MALS symptom is actually exercise intolerance, which doesn't make sense if you look at the entire list, because they all seem kind of gastrointestinal in nature. But exercise intolerance definitely explains why I was terrible at sports as a child. So to sum all that up, MALS also sucks. Thankfully, my MALS was treated, so I'm doing not quite as terribly as I was a few years ago, but objectively, things are still kind of terrible. This is where I would like to take just a quick, little tangent to say that I'm not telling you all this so that you can be like, oh, poor Vanessa, she's so sad. Because, yeah, things are terrible, but I'm not actually a sad, miserable little person. I don't want you to think I am. This is all just, the setup to a lot of really amazing things that have happened in my life. And to get to those amazing things, we have to do a quick rewind to January of 2016. In January of 2016, my POTS was completely out of control, and my local doctors were basically like, have you tried turning it on and off again? They had completely run out of ideas and things to try, and I was very much out of their league, so they sent me off to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, where I'd been diagnosed in the first place. And Mom and I ended up flying out, and when you fly out to the Mayo Clinic, you've just got a carry-on suitcase, and you can fit about a week's worth of clothes in a carry-on suitcase if you're also shoving the suitcase full of art supplies. And so we ended up staying over 2 weeks there. And so over the weekend, in between those 2 weeks, we had to do some laundry. And we have a fun, Christian-y phrase that is, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And I don't think that generally when we think about mysterious ways, we think about laundry. But I'm here to tell you that mysterious ways does in fact include laundry. Because as we were doing laundry and Mom was talking to people, because my mother's the kind of person who enjoys talking to people, she began talking with a woman named Lori. And Lori was there with her daughter, Makanda. Makanda was the patient, and she was about my age, and we had some kind of similar symptoms. And so because we had some kind of similar symptoms, we ended up having some overlapping in testing, including the most horrible test known to humankind. And I like to think that I'm a little bit of a leading expert on this subject, because I have drunk probably more barium than I have soda. I have eaten radioactive eggs. I have been injected with enough radioactive dye that realistically I should have superpowers by this point, and frankly I'm feeling a little cheated. I have exercised to the point of vomiting on doctor's orders. I've had enough blood drawn from my body to feed a small colony of vampires for like a year. And also, I literally pooped a balloon. So, I like to think that when it comes to terrible medical tests, I know what I'm talking about. And this sweat test is the worst test you can go through in terms of medicine. And it goes as such. Firstly, you lie down on a gurney, so you're already kind of thinking of death. Next, they sprinkle you with this orange powder that reminds you, unsettlingly, of that fake cheese stuff you put on movie theater popcorn. And then your orange body is rolled into an oversized easy bake oven, therefore furthering your thoughts both of death and of popcorn. And then you're forced to lie there for until you sweat, or in my case, until they can't keep you in there any longer for fear they'll actually roast you alive. The sweat test is the most terrible, horrible, no good, very bad test known to humankind, so therefore nothing bonds two 20-something strangers faster than the sweat test. Makanda and I became instant best friends when we met during laundry. And Mom and Lori also became instant best friends, and that friendship that we formed at Mayo Clinic changed all of our lives. The Lord works in mysterious ways, including laundry. Just keep that in mind. Over the next few months, Makanda and I got worse and worse as our conditions progressed, and eventually it got to the point where we were all afraid that Makanda was actually going to die. And not because we're dramatic people who just kind of, worry about that sort of thing, but because Lori was sleeping in Makanda's room every night because she was afraid Makanda was going to aspirate in her sleep. And that was just where we were at. And it was about that time that I got my malice diagnosis. And Mom put on her nerd hat, because my mom's a nerd, and she began to research everything she could about malice. And the more she read, the more studies, the more stories, the more she thought of Makanda. And sure enough, a couple months later, Makanda had a malice diagnosis too. I had surgery to correct my malice out in Connecticut in November of 2016. And a few weeks later, Makanda and Lori flew out, and Makanda had surgery to correct her malice. And that is like a great made-for-TV kind of movie, like somebody from Hallmark needs to give me a call, because we were even there around Christmas time. Like, we went and we saw Mall Santa. And if that is not Scream Hallmark, I don't know what does. But the story actually doesn't end there. Mom and I were out in Connecticut slightly longer than strictly necessary because we wanted to be there with Lori and Makanda. So Mom got to know some of the other moms who were there with their daughters who just had this surgery. I was patient number 15 to have this surgery by this particular surgeon. And so we all knew that we were kind of in uncharted territory. At my post-op appointment, my surgeon was like, yeah, you'll be nauseated for like 2 weeks or maybe 2 months. Bye. So we're like, okay, guess we're gonna have to do this out on our own. So Mom and Lori recognized the need for a safe space for all of us who were there at the same time in Connecticut to connect and engage with each other and ask each other, hey, is anybody else still nauseated? So they created a Facebook group for us to keep in contact. And that Facebook group that started in December of 2016 with 4 moms in a hospital room has now grown to help over 300 patients through the same surgical and recovery process that I went through. Which is like, yeah, wow, totally incredible. Yeah, it's a very good use of Facebook. And we've helped that many people, but we also kind of went above and beyond because this summer we all went back to Connecticut. Not everybody, but a lot of patients flew back to Connecticut for this very bizarre reunion that we called a reunion even though most of us were meeting each other face to face for the first time. And it was by far the most bizarre and wonderful thing I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. And that's not even everything that's happened. Because of all the advocacy work Mom and I have been doing for MALS, we were able to go to Facebook Community Summit at Facebook headquarters in February of this year. And Mom got to speak on a health panel out there. She's really awesome, sitting right there afterwards if you want to And then this summer, because of all the advocacy work that I've been doing for POTS, because I do a lot of that, I got to go to Kennedy Space Center and kind of get like a behind-the-scenes peek at how things work there. And I got to watch a test launch, and I love space. In case anyone doesn't know that, I love space a lot. So that was really awesome for me. And then, because I have been putting my faith first through all this wild and wacky stuff, I get to be here talking to you all for a second time, which is quite possibly the wildest and wackiest thing at all. But I must confess that for a while I did not actually put my faith first. And it was not a fun time for anybody. In February of 2015, I was in a car accident that kind of started this whole snowball. I was down at college, and it was like the most gentle car accident ever. We went around a corner, the roads were icy, and our car ended up tipping over in a ditch. But it was a very snowy ditch, and like fresh snow, so the car wasn't even scratched and nobody was hurt. But that was my body's cue to just like amp everything up. And all of my previously controlled symptoms became completely uncontrollable. And I struggled really, really hard to get through a day on a college campus. In fact, I became that kid who falls asleep on random benches around campus. Not because I wanted to be that kid, because who wants to be that kid? All your textbooks are sitting right there, and they're really expensive. You don't want to be the kid who falls asleep on a random bench. But I really didn't have any other option. It was the bench or the ground, you know? Take your pick. And that sucked. A lot. And when I came home after my semester, I thought I would, take the summer to rest and my body would pull itself back together and I'd be able to go back to college and get my life back on the, trajectory that I had planned for it. And that did not happen. I did not get better, and none of my doctors could help me. And I was very confused, and then I was very disappointed, and then I was very angry. And it was like this free-floating aggression that I just spat at everything. I was angry about my life, I was angry at my body, I was angry nobody could help me, I was angry nobody understood me, I was angry about the color of the paint of the walls at a doctor's office. Not even kidding. It was really bad. I was miserable, and everybody around me was miserable, and there was absolutely no good in that story. I don't remember when exactly, and I don't even really remember how, but at some point before our trip to Mayo in January of 2016, I shifted. I realized I did not like the person that I was. I wasn't having any fun at all, being angry and bitter all the time. And so I started to shift. And I shifted from this little angry ball of venom into a person who is still struggling really, really, really hardcore, but was focusing less on everything that sucked and more on her savior. And that shift in perspective changed everything. When we go through bad things, when bad things happen happen to us, it's normal and natural to have a period of grief and mourning. Everybody has that period of grief and mourning where you're upset about the things you've lost and about what's happening to you. Everybody has those emotions, everybody goes through that period of time. But some of us get kind of stuck there, like, indefinitely. And when I think about this, and I think about, biblical figures who remind me of that concept, Naomi and Job both come to mind. Because they both went through really, really, really sucky situations, and they both kind of got stuck in bitter mode. Naomi had to leave everything that she knew due to a famine. And then in a foreign land, she lost her husband and both of her sons. And that level of grief broke her. And when she finally returned home, she told all the people who had known her before not to call her Naomi, but to call her Mara, which means bitter. And so Naomi wasn't just bitter about the stuff that had happened to her, she was just bitter. That's how she defined herself. And Job is a guy I've kind of struggled with over the years. Because Job's like that one biblical character that everybody goes to and they're like, suffering servants in the Bible. Job. And I'm like, why did I always pick Job? Like, true, he never cursed God like his wife told him to. She's only like, curse God and die. Thanks, hon. So he never did that. But he was kind of really bitter about, like, everything. And he had a right to be, to an extent, He was just a dude living his life, and then all of a sudden, he lost all of his worldly possessions, and all of his children, and then his health. And that's a lot of suck in a really short period of time. And to be fair, he did not have the same perspective on God that we do, because he didn't have the New Testament or even the Old Testament. He was just a dude living life, and then all of a sudden, the worst calamities imaginable just kind of dogpiled him. But I had an epiphany the last time I read through Job. And this epiphany was that Job has a problem that's kind of like central to why he becomes so bitter. And Job's problem is actually a problem that's shared by a lot of people in the Christian community. And Job's problem is that he expected that because he was doing good stuff, God would give him good things. So he expected blessings because of his good works. And I feel like sometimes Christians kind of carry this mentality around in their back pocket that because they're doing, good Christian things and checking their little boxes and saying the right prayers, that God's going to bless them and nothing bad will ever happen to them ever. And if you read the Bible, that kind of mentality is actually like the direct opposite of what the Word of God actually says. And when we carry around a mentality that is the direct opposite of what the Word of God says, it's really no wonder that we become bitter and angry and start spitting venom at people like some kind of evil one. But I can hear you thinking, what about that verse in Jeremiah? The one that's all, I know the plans I have for you, plans for good, not for harm, to bring you hope in a future. What about that verse in Romans about how God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose? What about those? And to those I say amen, and let it be so. But also, our view of what is good is often far too narrow. And we shall use my suckfest as an example. If you were to look at my dumpster fire of a physical form, you would probably think the first kind of good that should come to me would be physical healing. And that's just where we go. We see a sick person, we're like, God should heal that person. But it's just kind of our natural response. And I'm not here to say that healing doesn't happen. Healing does happen. God works miracles. Amen and amen. But healing is not the only good that can happen. My body still sucks. I am physically disabled by my conditions. I cannot live on my own. I cannot get a 9-to-5 job. I often cannot even stand up during the worship service at church. I have lived the last 4 years in pain and exhaustion, and God could have healed me, but He didn't. And I could be really bitter and angry about that, because it is so easy to be really bitter and angry about that. But I recognize that that definition of good is too small. The book of Jeremiah says God's working for our good, but Isaiah points out that God's ways are higher than our ways and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And Romans says God's working for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Not my purpose, not my little version of good. If God had healed me way back when, and I hadn't met Makanda and none of this had happened, it's very likely that Makanda would have died. Like, Mouse is not a well-known diagnosis. Her doctors weren't looking for it. My doctors weren't even looking for it. It was kind of, oops, look, we found this diagnosis for you. And had that diagnosis not been found, Makanda wouldn't have gotten hers, and she would have continued to deteriorate. And it's more than likely that she would have died from complications. And if God had healed me, and I hadn't met Makanda, and all this stuff hadn't happened, hundreds, maybe at this point, thousands, of people would not have the help and support they need as they go through a really, really difficult diagnostic and treatment and recovery process. And hundreds, maybe thousands of people would not actively see the hand of God at work in my life and in the lives of those around me. The story could have been really small if God had healed me. But the story also could have been really small if I had focused on my little version of good. If I had sat there wondering, why hasn't God healed me yet? Because if I sat there wondering that, I would have been stuck in the anger and the bitterness. And if I'd been stuck in the anger and the bitterness when we went to Mayo Clinic in January of 2016, I don't think Makanda and I would have been friends. Because I didn't even want to be my friend then. So how could I expect that Makanda and I would have become really good friends? If I'd been so full of anger and bitterness, how could I have possibly been a vessel for light and love in that place and at that time? We're all going to go through sucky situations. I don't know what your sucky situation is going to be, and I don't know exactly when it's going to come, but I know it's coming because Jesus said so. In this world you will have trouble, He said. John 16:33. The New Vanessa version is, in this world your life is going to suck. Aren't you really glad they asked me to come back? But Jesus doesn't leave us hanging. He says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. I looked up the word overcome, for fun. And it means succeed in dealing with a problem or difficulty. Take heart. Whatever you're going through, or whatever you will go through, Jesus has already dealt with it. And God has a plan for it. Those two facts don't suddenly magically make your terrible situation any less terrible. It's still hard, it still sucks, it's still trouble. But we can take comfort in knowing that Jesus has overcome that trouble. And when we turn to Him with our hurts and our bitterness and our anger, and when we do the very difficult thing of letting go of the hurts and the anger and the bitter, we find in its place His peace that passes understanding. We find inexplicable joy in the face of difficulty. We find even the ability to say, and I do not say this lightly, but I am glad God did not heal me. I am glad that God is not confined to my little version of good. I am so glad that God has better plans than I will ever possibly imagine. And I am quite excited to see what comes next. I know full well that as I get older and my body naturally deteriorates, as all bodies do, things are going to continue to suck. And it's actually very likely that things will get worse. And as a 26-year-old chronically ill person without insurance, that's terrifying! But I'm also fully aware that no matter what happens and no matter what comes and no matter what new thing smacks me in the face and takes me down in a knockdown, drag-out cage fight, God is still in my corner, and God is still working good. And I'm determined to live from a place of grace and faith and love, so that when this good comes, I can recognize it, and I can be an active participant in it. Because that's like the coolest thing you will ever do with your life, ever. God has good plans for me. But I don't know what that good is. I don't know when it's going to come. I don't know if it's going to be good in my life or if it's actually going to be good showing up in somebody else's life, because that happens sometimes. I don't know if it's going to be good tomorrow or if it's going to be good 10 years from now. But I am determined to live with that intentional grace and love, so that when the good comes, and whatever odd shape it takes, I will be able to recognize it for what it is. Going back to Naomi, Naomi was so bitter that she didn't know good until it basically smacked her in the face. She was so bitter that she could not see the blessing that was Ruth simply being there for her. She was so focused on all the things she had lost and all the bad stuff that had happened to her that she couldn't see the good that refused to leave her side. Naomi couldn't see good happening right there in her own life until she let go of enough of her bitterness to let the good in. When we let go of our bitterness and hold tight to the reality that life sucks, but God is working good anyway, we are actually able to see the good that God is doing in our lives. We're able to become active participants in that good. And it's so much bigger and so much stranger than anything we have ever imagined. God has beautiful things planned for you. In the midst of your suck, through your suck, and because of your suck. So rejoice in your suckfest. Because the simple act of rejoicing and the very difficult act of daily letting go of your bitterness opens you up to so much good. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. God is still working for your good. Thank you.